I had just gotten home after a long, grueling deployment overseas. Months of heat, sand, exhaustion, and adrenaline left my body worn but my spirit stronger than ever. All I wanted now was peace, a quiet weekend with my family, grilling in the backyard, listening to music, and catching up on sleep. I pulled into my neighborhood feeling that familiar sense of calm. This was home. As I turned the corner toward my house, I saw something strange. A white SUV I didn't recognize was parked directly across my driveway. Not in it, across it, completely blocking me from pulling in. At first, I thought it might be someone visiting a neighbor, maybe just a quick drop-off, so I pulled to the curb, got out, and waited a moment, but no one came out. No one appeared from the car. I walked up to it slowly, peering through the windshield. The engine was off. There was no one inside. I knocked on my neighbor's door. "Hey, is that your car out front?" He glanced out and shook his head. "Nope, not ours. Haven't seen it before." So I walked across to the other neighbor. Still nothing. That's when I saw her, marching down the sidewalk like she owned the block. Sunglasses on, phone in one hand, latte in the other. The classic suburban stride of someone who'd never been told no. I could already sense it. She was a Karen, and she was about to make this difficult. I greeted her calmly. "Hey, is that your SUV? It's blocking my driveway." Without even looking at me, she said, "I'll just be a few minutes," and walked right past like I didn't exist. I paused. I'd just come back from leading men through life-or-death situations, from dealing with danger and chaos most people could never imagine. I'd learned patience, I'd learned restraints, but I wasn't about to let someone disrespect me in my own home. "Ma'am," I said again, "I live here. I need to park in my driveway. Please move your car." She finally turned around. "Well, I'm visiting a friend on this street, and there was no open spot. You'll survive. It's just a car." The audacity hit me harder than any explosion ever had. I stared at her for a long moment, measuring my response. I wasn't going to escalate, but I also wasn't going to let her win. "I'm asking you nicely," I said. "Please move the vehicle." She scoffed. "Are you threatening me?" "No, ma'am, I'm asking for common courtesy." She rolled her eyes, spun around, and walked off. No apology, no acknowledgement, just pure entitlement. Just pure entitlement. I stood there for a moment, breathing slow and steady. My duffel bag was still in my trunk. My welcome home sign from my kids sat in the back seat. I looked at the car, I looked at my house, just beyond it, and I realized this was not going to be over quickly. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Texted my wife to let her know I'd be out front for a bit longer. She offered to come help, but I told her to stay inside with the kids. No need to drag them into this. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation. They said they'd send someone over shortly. But apparently, Karen wasn't done. She came back with another woman, equally smug. They stood near the car, whispering and laughing like it was some kind of joke. I approached again. "Is one of you going to move the vehicle?" Her friend piped up, "You don't own the road." "Sir, no," I replied, "but I own that house. And the driveway. And I'm asking you one last time to move." Karen tilted her head and said, "You know, I don't think you're allowed to threaten women like this. Maybe I should call the police." I smiled politely. "That's fine. I've already called them." Her expression changed, slightly. But before she could respond, we all heard it, the sound of heavy tires turning onto the street. A deep engine rumble. 2 Humvees rolled around the corner, followed by a third military truck. You see, I had a little surprise planned. My platoon, many of whom lived nearby, had offered to help welcome me home that afternoon. They were dropping by for a barbecue. It wasn't anything formal, just a casual hangout. But their timing couldn't have been better. The vehicles pulled up behind the SUV. Soldiers began hopping out. Not in uniform, but clearly disciplined, strong, and very aware of what was going on. One of them called out, "Hey, Captain, is this the famous Karen you told us about?" I couldn't help but laugh. Karen turned pale. Suddenly, the situation shifted. She looked from the trucks to the men, to me. "What is this?" "These are my friends," I said, "and we're about to have a barbecue. But first, I need to park my truck." One of my sergeants walked over to her SUV. "Ma'am, you might want to move this, or the tow truck arriving next might take it." She stammered. "You people can't intimidate me, I'll have you all arrested." Another soldier chuckled. "We've been arrested in worse places than this, ma'am." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors peeking out, phones recording. Karen looked around and finally got the message. She stormed to her car, slammed the door, and peeled off without another word. The moment she was gone, the whole platoon broke into laughter. I parked my car in my driveway and walked toward my family, who had come outside to greet us. The kids ran up. My wife hugged me tight, and we all went inside. We spent the next few hours laughing, eating, catching up, and swapping stories. The drama faded. Karen never came back, but the message stuck with me. Sometimes, people need to be reminded that respect isn't optional. And sometimes, life gives you just the right moment to prove that you're not someone to mess with, not because you're loud or angry, but because you've earned your strength through years of service, sacrifice, and discipline. I just stood there for a moment, staring at her beat-up Honda parked sideways across my driveway, blocking both my truck and the gate that led to my backyard. My jaw clenched. She'd done it again. I took a deep breath, counting to 5, the way my old drill sergeant had taught me, trying to stay calm. But today wasn't a regular day. It was reunion day. The guys from my old platoon were on their way, some driving from other states, some flying in. These weren't just friends. They were family men I had bled with, suffered with, and survived hell with. And here I was, locked out of my own driveway because Karen had decided it was her right to park wherever she pleased. I knocked on her door again, this time firmer. Nothing. I texted one of the guys, Sanchez, who was already just 5 minutes away. She's blocking the drive again, I wrote. His response was immediate. You want us to come through the back? Yeah, gate's still open. Just let yourselves in. Meanwhile, I walked around to the backyard and pulled out the folding chairs and coolers. We'd planned to set up near the fire pit. Even though we hadn't started the reunion officially, the mood in my chest was already souring. Karen had a way of doing that, twisting a good day into something exhausting. 20 minutes later, I heard the first sound of boots hitting gravel. Sanchez, then Marcus, Big Joe, and Malik followed right behind. They each gave me the same look as they approached, one of confusion, frustration, and then shared laughter. She really did it again, huh? Marcus asked, squinting toward the front of the house. Yup, that's Karen. Big Joe cracked open a drink and laughed. What is it with entitled people in driveways? She act like she owns the whole street. Malik shook his head. Man, back home, somebody did this. Their car would be in a ditch before they even found out. We all laughed, but deep down, I was still stewing. I'd spoken to Karen about this 3 times in the past. The HOA had even sent her a warning letter. She claimed she didn't care because there was no signage, which, technically, was true. But it was common decency not to block someone's driveway, especially not repeatedly. Want us to move it for you? Sanchez asked, half joking. I shrugged. Tempting. Malik grinned. You forget we got a couple of Army engineers here, 1 pry bar and a couple of hands. We can relocate her little tin can halfway down the block. Again, laughter broke the tension. But then, I saw movement from the front. Karen stepped out in a fluffy pink bathrobe, holding a mug that probably had more vodka than coffee in it. She saw all of us in the backyard and shouted over the fence. You're having a party. That's cute. You know there's noise ordinances, right? I couldn't help but chuckle at her hypocrisy. She'd thrown more than one drunk karaoke night at 2 a.m. herself. I walked toward the fence. Karen, we're not having a party. We're having a private reunion. You blocked my driveway again. She rolled her eyes. I'm just parked there for a bit. I had groceries to unload. I'll move it when I feel like it. Marcus muttered under his breath. She's got no idea who she's talking to. I held up my phone. Then I'll feel like calling the tow company. You wouldn't dare, she barked. Sanchez stepped beside me. Actually, he would. And he'd be well within his rights. Karen's face twisted in offense. Oh great. Now it's a gang up. Who even are all of you? I didn't say anything. Big Joe stepped forward calmly. We're veterans, ma'am. Served overseas with this man. We came here to spend the day together. You're welcome to move your car and let the man have his driveway back. Karen's eyes flickered between US 6 tall, disciplined, broad-shouldered men who stood calmly but firmly. We weren't angry. We weren't violent. We were just unshakable. That seemed to throw her off. She snorted. This whole street is public property. I don't have to move a thing. That was it. I dialed the local towing service I'd kept on speed dial since her last stunt. The dispatchers said they'd be there in 20 minutes. Suit yourself, I said, turning away. You've got 19 minutes before your car's gone. Karen huffed and stormed back inside. We went back to our reunion. More of the guys arrived. More coolers were opened. Laughter filled the backyard as stories from our time overseas echoed between the fences. We talked about nights in bunkers, surprise attacks, pranks during training, and the crazy bets that somehow became tradition. Every single person had a story that could make you laugh and cry in the same breath. One of the newer members of the platoon arrived with his 6-year-old daughter. She ran up the path, waving an American flag and giggling. This the infamous Karen, he asked, nodding toward the front. I laughed. You heard about her already. Dude, you're a legend on the group chat. Then, right on cue, the tow truck rolled in. Big yellow rig, heavy-duty hook, and a determined-looking driver. He parked on the side, got out, and walked straight up to me. Is it the Honda across the drive? Yup, been there for hours. He nodded and got to work. We all watched from the backyard, beer cans in hand, as the metal arm slid under Karen's car. The beeping sound of the lift began, and the Honda's front tires rose slowly. Then came the scream. Karen burst out of her house, like she'd been shot out of a cannon. Stop, Stop, that's my car. She sprinted toward the tow truck, slippers flapping, robe trailing behind her. You can't tow it. You can't. The tow driver didn't even blink. It's an unauthorized block. Homeowner called it in. You'll have to take it up with dispatch. I'm not paying $300 to get it back, she shrieked. I stayed quiet. The guys were all silent too, watching like it was a live show. Sanchez pulled out his phone and began filming. This better not end up on TikTok, Karen shouted, noticing the camera. You're lucky it's not already viral, Sanchez said, laughing. The truck drove off. And with that, the mood shifted completely. Everyone clapped, not in mockery, but in relief. The blockade was gone. We had full access. The day could finally begin properly. Karen retreated, furious, slamming her door hard enough to rattle her windows, but she didn't come back out. The rest of the afternoon was perfect. We grilled steaks, shared old war stories, and raised a toast. To the ones we lost, for those few hours, it felt like time stopped. Like the stress, the battles, and the years had melted away. All that remained was the bond between brothers and Karen. She didn't dare show her face again that day. I watched from the living room window, arms crossed, barely able to believe what I was seeing. Karen had not only ignored the warning from Officer Stevens, but she doubled down. She had moved her car even closer to my driveway, almost snug against the gate, like she was daring someone to touch it. The kind of boldness you only see in someone who's used to getting their way. That morning, I was up early. Army habit, coffee brewed, boots on. I stepped outside and looked at the car sitting smugly like a barricade. I wasn't surprised, but I was definitely disappointed. There were no apologies, no signs of retreat. Just Karen's car and her defiance. I didn't want to fight, but I also wasn't going to keep bowing my head in my own home. A few hours later, as I sat on my porch sipping that second cup of coffee, my phone buzzed. It was Logan, one of my old platoon mates. Hey man, he said. We're rolling. Through town, reunion weekend, you in. I hadn't seen most of them in years. Deployment had scattered us like leaves in the wind. But the bond we shared, that never went away. Yeah, I said, eyes still fixed on the car blocking my driveway. I'm in fact, let's meet at my place. I've got a situation. Hey, laughed, not knowing what he was agreeing to. Within a couple hours, trucks started rolling in. Not military grade anymore, but they all had the feel. Sturdy pickups, flag decals, boots hitting the gravel with the same rhythm we once marched with. My porch filled up with familiar faces. The crew was here, Alex, Big Mike, Deshaun, Logan, and a few others. Each one of them had a story. Each one of them had my back. They noticed the car immediately. Trouble? Alex asked, nodding toward the driveway. I gave a slight grin. You could say that. I told them the short version of Karen, how she blocked me and repeatedly, how she lashed out, and how she practically laughed at the police warning. They shook their heads, shared a few muttered curses, and then Logan clapped his hands. Well, let's handle this the way we always do. Calm, smart, and with a touch of style. Now this wasn't about intimidation. This wasn't about acting like some gang of enforcers. No, these were men of discipline, trained not just to fight, but to assess, de-escalate, and act with purpose. They didn't need to puff their chests, they just needed to show up. And that's exactly what they did. One by one, they parked in the street, on the curb, forming a respectful semicircle. Karen's car, now looking smaller than ever, was boxed in by presence alone. No words were spoken yet. We didn't need to. The neighbor across the street peeked out of her curtain, eyes wide. Then another one stepped out to check their mail and paused mid-step. Word was spreading. This wasn't just another driveway drama. This was different. Then the door creaked. Karen stepped out. Sunglasses on, phone in hand, like she was preparing to live stream a confrontation she expected to win. She wasn't ready. For what she saw, she blinked at the line of men on my porch and in front of her car. She looked left, then right. Her confident stride slowed to a cautious pace. What is this? She asked, her voice shaky for the first time. Friends, I replied calmly. Army buddies, we're having a small reunion. They can't block the street, she snapped. They're not blocking anything, I said. But your car? Still is. She hesitated, her eyes darted toward my gate. Then the porch full of calm, observing veterans. Nobody moved toward her. Nobody raised a voice. That's what unsettled her the most. This is harassment, she mumbled, lifting her phone. Deshaun, ever the diplomat, stepped forward. Ma'am, no one is threatening you, but you've repeatedly ignored private property. You've been warned. Today, we're just here for our friend, but we won't be silent if you continue to trespass. Karen looked around again. Her arrogance cracked. I'm calling the cops. Please do, Alex said. We've got nothing to hide, and they already know the history here. Her phone hung limp in her hand for a moment. Then, without another word, she turned and marched back toward her house. 20 minutes later, her car was gone, moved back into her driveway. Just like it always should have been. We didn't cheer, we didn't gloat, we just nodded at each other, a silent acknowledgement that sometimes the right presence solves the wrong problems. The rest of the day was filled with laughter and memory. We grilled steaks, shared stories from dusty camps and stormy nights, swapped jokes that wouldn't make sense to anyone else. It felt like home again. That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I stood on my porch with Logan beside me. "You think she'd try again?" he asked. "Maybe," I replied, "but I think she got the message." He chuckled. "Who needs a tow truck when you've got a platoon?" I laughed too, the tension finally melting from my shoulders. The truth is, I didn't want conflict. But sometimes, when your peace is threatened, you need to remind people who you are. I'm not just a guy with a driveway. I'm a soldier, a citizen, and I don't stand alone. I stood frozen for a moment, watching Karen pace angrily beside her car, muttering to herself like she had just been robbed of a crown. Her entitlement wasn't new, but this situation was turning into something else. She had no idea what she had walked into. As I turned back toward the house, I could see the soldiers from my old platoon slowly trickling out of the garage and backyard. Having finished setting up the grills and drinks, they had all heard the commotion, and I knew it wouldn't be long before they'd want to come see what the noise was about. I took a deep breath, trying to keep things calm. I didn't want this day to spiral. It was a reunion, a celebration of survival, of brotherhood, and of the long years we'd been through together, wars fought overseas, sacrifices made. Today was about peace and laughter, not neighborhood drama. But peace wasn't on Karen's mind. She stood beside her illegally parked car, arms crossed, and shouted again, "I'm not moving. You don't own this street. I know the city council, and I'll have your party shut down." I walked slowly toward her, raising my hand slightly to show I wasn't there for a confrontation. "Karen, you're blocking the entire entrance to my driveway. My friends are arriving soon. I'm asking one last time, please move your car. You people think you're above the law because you wear a uniform. You're not intimidating me." She spat out behind me. I could hear the crunch of boots stepping onto the pavement. I turned my head slightly and saw 5 of my brothers in arms walking up. James, tall and calm as ever. Louis, quiet but never missed a detail. Franco, who always had a bit of fire in him. Miller, the guy with the dry wit that made everything bearable overseas. And then Hank, my second-in-command from deployment, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed. They didn't say a word at first, they just stood behind me, silent, composed, and present. Karen's eyes flicked from me to the men behind me. Her lips twisted. "Oh great, now you've called your little army gang to threaten me." Hank stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, nobody is threatening you, but you're in the wrong. You're parked on private property, blocking emergency access, and we've asked politely for you to move." "Emergency access?" she scoffed. "What emergency are you planning? A barbecue invasion?" Franco muttered under his breath. "Lady really has a death wish for peace and quiet." Earning a subtle chuckle from Louis, I took another step forward. "Karen, these men behind me have carried me out of firefights. We've bled together, lost friends together, and today is the first time in years we've all gathered like this. I'm not asking for a parade or a special treatment. I'm asking you to move your car so we can celebrate a bit of life." Karen stared, unmoved. "I don't care about your sob stories. I had a nail appointment I missed because of your party, and now I'm making a point." Hank's jaw clenched, and I could feel the patience in the group thinning. None of these men were violent by nature, but we were trained to handle conflict, and every one of them had spent years practicing discipline. Under pressure, this was not a situation they wanted, but it was one they were ready for if needed. At that moment, a police cruiser rolled slowly down the street. I had called earlier, just in case things escalated, and apparently, someone else had to probably. One of the neighbors. Karen's eyes lit up. Finally, someone with authority. Officer, over here." The cruiser pulled up, and a young female officer stepped out, sunglasses on, hand resting calmly near her utility belt. "What seems to be the problem here?" Karen was already in overdrive. "These men are threatening me. They're using military intimidation tactics to try and bully me into moving my vehicle. I want them arrested." The officer raised an eyebrow, then looked over at the 6 of us standing calmly. "Is that true, gentlemen?" Hank shook his head. "No ma'am, we've asked her 3 times to move her vehicle. She's blocking this man's driveway. It's private property, and she refused. We've remained calm and respectful." The officer looked at me. "You live here?" "Yes. This is my home. And this is your driveway." "Yes," Karen interrupted. "But this is a public road. He's hosting some kind of unauthorized event, and I was just trying to get through." The officer turned back to her. "Ma'am, your car is parked directly across the entrance to a private driveway. That's illegal. I'm going to need you to move it right now." "What, are you seriously taking their side?" "I'm enforcing the law. Ma'am, if you don't move the vehicle, I'll have it towed." Karen looked stunned. Her defiance faltered, and for a moment, she just stood there, breathing heavily. "You people always get away with everything," she muttered bitterly. "No, ma'am," the officer said coolly. They've earned the right to be respected. Karen finally stormed to her car, flung open the door, and reversed out of the driveway with a screech. As she sped down the street, she rolled down her window and yelled, "This isn't over." The officer sighed and turned back to us. "Sorry about that. Enjoy your day, gentlemen." Hank smiled. "Thanks, officer. Appreciate it." The officer gave us a nod, got back into her cruiser, and slowly rolled away. With the path finally clear, the rest of our guests began arriving. Trucks pulled in, hugs were exchanged, and the smell of burgers and grilled chicken filled the air. Kids of neighbors ran around in the grass with plastic water guns, and the sound of classic rock played from the backyard speakers. I stood for a moment, looking over the whole scene. What could have been a disaster had become a reminder of how far we had come and what we had fought for. Not just freedom in the abstract sense, but the simple freedom to gather, to share laughter, to live in peace without being pushed around later. As the sun dipped low and orange hues filled the sky, I sat on the porch steps with Hank beside me. We watched the others laughing around the fire pit. He nudged me lightly and said, "You know, I half expected this to turn into one of our old missions." I chuckled. "Yeah, but this time, we got to walk away with full plates and cold drinks." He smiled. "I'll take that over dodging bullets any day." Me too. I looked around at the people who mattered, the memories we were creating, and I knew no Karen in the world could block that. She stood frozen, as if realizing too late that this wasn't just a regular neighborhood squabble anymore. The presence of my platoon in full uniform, neatly aligned and calm but serious, seemed to wake her up to the reality of what she had stirred up. My platoon sergeant stepped forward, cool as ever, and simply said, "Ma'am, your vehicle is obstructing a military officer's personal property access. That's a violation. Would you like to move it or wait for official action?" Karen blinked rapidly, like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled out her keys. "I didn't realize you were with the army," she muttered, stepping over to her car with noticeably less bravado than before. The neighborhood, by now, had all eyes on the scene. Some folks stood by their porches, pretending to water plants or take out the trash. But it was clear they were watching closely. As she moved her car, her attitude was gone. The arrogance, the yelling, the finger-waving, it all dissolved into quiet embarrassment. She parked on the other side of the street, sat in her car for a moment, and then drove away completely, leaving behind a strange silence. No apology, but that was fine. The message had been received. The tension eased almost instantly once her car disappeared down the street. A few neighbors clapped quietly. Some nodded with relief. I looked at my guys and they smiled, some shaking their heads as if to say, "Only you, man, only you get into something like this on a weekend." I thanked them for showing up. It meant more than I could say. They didn't need to do that. It wasn't a mission, it wasn't duty. It was just brotherhood. Brotherhood that doesn't stop when the uniform comes off. We headed into the backyard. The BBQ resumed, laughter slowly returning to the air. But the story had already been born. And as stories tend to go in close communities, it spread like wildfire. People who had never talked to me before suddenly waved. Neighbors knocked later to ask if I needed anything. It's strange how quickly public perception shifts when the truth comes out, especially when the truth shows up wearing boots and discipline. But something bigger happened inside me that day. Not just pride in my team or satisfaction in how things ended. It was a reminder of how easily some people judge others based on their assumptions, how quickly they try to dominate situations they don't understand. Karen had seen a man in a hoodie and assumed the worst. She had chosen conflict over conversation. But the moment uniformed strength appeared behind that same man, her tone changed, and that says something deep about our world. It made me reflect on how often people like Karen go unchecked, not because others don't see, but because they fear confrontation or don't know how to respond. But having support, real, tangible support, can make all the difference. That support, for me, came in the form of brothers who would stand beside me, even off the battlefield. Weeks passed. Karen never showed her face in my part of the street. Again, someone said she put her house up for rent. Whether it was because of embarrassment or something else, I didn't really care. The point had been made, not by shouting, not by chaos, but by presence, unity, and calm authority. Later that month, my unit held a get-together at the base. One of the younger soldiers nudged me, laughing. "Hey Captain, you gonna write a manual called How to Defuse a Karen with a Platoon?" We all laughed. But behind the joke was a truth: we didn't need violence. We didn't need threats. We just needed to stand together. That's all it took. Looking back, it's easy to laugh. It was a wild day, but I also know how different it could have gone if I hadn't had that support, or if Karen had escalated further. Too many situations go the wrong way because of pride, misunderstanding, or fear. But this one didn't, and for that, I'm thankful. There's something powerful about knowing you're not alone. That no matter how ridiculous the situation, you've got people who will stand beside you, not just because you're part of a team, but because you've earned their respect. Because you'd do the same for them. And sometimes, that presence alone is the loudest statement you can make. So now, whenever I grill on weekends, I keep that driveway clear not because I expect Karen to return, but because I like the open space. A few of my neighbors now join me more often. They bring drinks, kids run around, someone plays music. The air is lighter, and every now and then, someone asks, "Was that really your whole platoon that showed up that day?" I just smile. Yeah, that's what family looks like. And that, right there, is the truth.